Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ethos Online. Again, this is a space where we can be, belong, and become the very best version of ourselves. And so, wherever you're joining us, thank you for being a part of this. This conversation has continued. We look at different books of the Bible. We have deconstructed, reconstructed ways in which to view it in a responsible way. And so, as always, we want to remind you, please consider donating. You'll see the links below in the details. Consider partnering with us in this journey of deconstructing, reconstructing. If you'd like to also subscribe, look at that subscribe button down below and the bell. Click those. We'd, again, love to continue partnering with you, letting you know whenever there's new content. So everyone joining us, we are continuing to move through this book, Genesis. And so Genesis, once again, was not intended to be a history book. It just wasn't. That's not the reason why it's written. Ancient tribes were not writing historically accurate information about their tribes. They were writing their values and their stories and their metaphors, their heroic tellings, their warnings, their laws, their rituals. That's what they're writing. And so for Israel, again, we have to remember always from the get-go, and some of you are going to be experts at this because you're going to be able to memorize this, right? Israel is captured by the Babylonians. And their temple's destroyed. They're marched hundreds of miles on foot. They get to Babylon, all the other empires that have been conquered. They're all there. And they are assimilating to the Babylonian way of life. Which means not only are you now eating Babylonian food, whatever that looks like, you're now beginning to take on their gods, their values, their rituals. Israel is one of the few tribes, especially in the Middle East, and again, there are hundreds of different tribes there in the Middle East, but this one tribe during that time era, they choose to hold on to their values. They choose not to assimilate. And that's what makes Israel's story really, really interesting. And so what they do is Torah. Again, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. This is a compilation of basically a written response to their fears of assimilation. And so it's a compilation of poetry, mythology, poetic musings, warnings. It's all of those things. But the one thing it is not not history. It is not perfect sound history. That's not what it is. Torah, again, is a complete narrative of Israel miniaturized. Israel is the theme, right? Israel is the main character. Every time you see a character, a story told, it's really about Israel. It's about keeping Israel's values, who they are, where they've been, where they're going. That's the main idea here of the book of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. That's it. Yeah, good, right? So Genesis 1, once again, we move through Genesis 1. We understand now. This is a response to the Babylonian understanding of their gods, the way they view how things come to be, right? And so again, their God brings chaos. Israel's God takes the chaos, brings order, clears the table, begins setting it. That's the idea here. Brings life from chaos, and they tell it from a poem, right? It's a poetry kind of response. It is not a story in Genesis 1. It is not historical fact. It is a poem, which makes Genesis 2 and 3 and so on a story, a narrative. Again, one not told in a scholarly classroom, right, where you're talking about history. It's not a history story. It's a campfire kind of story, where the epic stories and traditions, they all come together to remind kids the fish was that, and it got this and this and this. And this is about our people and our richness and our identity and our values. That's the idea here of the campfire telling. So again, we know, here's the graph, Genesis 1 versus Genesis 2, they're very different in their tellings. And so when we understand this, it's not that the two are against each other. It's not that one is true and one's not. You don't have to go there. You can say one is a poem, one is a campfire storytelling, and they're all about Israel. That's the beauty. Yeah. So we're going to step in Genesis 3, 11 through 19 today. So I'm going to start here. It goes like this. After they've eaten the fruit, right? after God realizes, hey, who told you about the fruit? Who told you were naked? Right? They've sewn their fig bikinis right together. They notice they're naked. Right? There's shame. There's guilt. They followed the temptation. Right? So what happens next is this: they begin turning on each other. Right? Because that's what we do. When we get in trouble, you think about it as a child. When you got in trouble, well, it wasn't just your fault. It was Bobby as well down the street. Right? You got to be able to put some of that anger, you got to place it somewhere else because you don't want it all on you. Right? It's in our human DNA to do this, isn't it? And to fight against it is good, but we don't always do that. So here we go. Let me just read it. And the man said, "The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, so I ate it." And the Lord God said to the woman, "What is it that you have done?" And the woman said, "The serpent. It's the serpent that enticed me." Notice this. Again, this is the blame game. We begin pointing fingers. The man says it's the woman. The woman says it's the snake. The snake's like, crap, I don't have any hands to point anything. You see the direction here we're going, right? The blame game, the blame game, the blame game. We do it all the time. One psychologist, he points out some interesting things about the blame game. The blame game, here's why it's so enticing to use blame, right? To not take ownership of your own issues, right? You did something, but it's far easier to not take the blame, right? And to just put it off on someone else. So he says this: it's easier it's easier to blame someone else because you don't have to take responsibility for your actions. Yeah, this is one very enticing element of what makes blame so interesting, right? When you blame someone else, you're so quick to remove any responsibility from yourself. You've put all the focus somewhere else. And so you have a momentary feeling of, okay, I'm okay. I've distracted them. But the truth is, it's going to come back to you anyways, isn't it? Another thing he points out, it removes any feelings of guilt or shame from us, and it puts it on someone else. You essentially create a victim here, don't you? Yeah, you put that on something else. And so it causes the brain and the body to relax, releasing endorphins, removing stress hormones. It does something to the brain as well in the body. Yeah, and so no wonder we're so quick to blame. Again, the man blames the woman blames the snake, what do I do? And the blame game, right? And so nations do this, people do this, organizations do this. But rarely do you see organizations and people and nations say, you know what? We're going to take responsibility where responsibility is due, right? We're not always perfect. You don't always see this happen, but when you do, it's brilliant. It allows people to let their guards down, doesn't it? Yeah, it allows others to say, you know what? We can take the blame for this too. It's no longer an attacking motion. It's a we motion, right? It invites conversation. It invites people to create solutions together. Whereas the blame game, it goes nowhere. It just creates more victims. And this is what we see in the story. The story goes on. And God said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, cursed be you more than the cattle and more than the beasts of the fields. You shall walk on your belly. You shall eat dust from the days of your life. And I shall place hatred between you and between the woman and between your seed and between her seed. He will crush your head. You will bite his heel." Now, a couple things about this verse. One of them is people have oftentimes tried to say, see, it's the devil. Right? The snake is the devil, and at some point Jesus will step on the head of the snake, and they've tried to make this like a prophetic thing. I can just tell you from the get-go, when these ancient people are in Babylon, and they are writing this story, they are not thinking about a Jewish rabbi in the first century. I'm sorry, that's just not the case. Here's the image they're thinking, right? A deceptive character, right? A deceptive character in their metaphor. Right? This metaphorical garden. What would be the perfect deceptive character for them? Well, we talked about it. The snake. Yeah. In the desert. Again, when you are walking in the desert, you are going to come across the snake at some point, and usually they're hiding just under the surface. So again, you get bit, you're toast. Your camel, your donkey gets bit, you are carrying the load. It makes sense. And so an interesting way of telling the story of how the snake came to be, well, here's an interesting story, right? A metaphor, a story, something told around the campfire. I've even heard people go as far as to say, "Oh, well, snakes used to have wings, and because the snake deceived, now it's been removed of its wings, and now it's floating on the ground on its belly." That's just weird. Right? God decides to make a show of this poor animal because it's been possessed apparently by the devil. You can see how it gets very, very weird and convoluted, right? Unless you understand, again, this is a story from ancient tribal people, and again, the perfect description, the perfect criminal in the story would be something they, as a nomadic people, come across daily. An animal that is often associated with deception, a snake. It makes sense. And you don't have to lose your gray matter in order to make sense of it. It continues on. I shall surely increase. So again, we talked about the serpent. Now God says to the woman. To the woman, he said, I shall surely increase your sorrow and your pregnancy. In pain, you shall bear children. So think about that one. How do you describe, why would you be in so much pain, right? Again, they're thinking through these different ideas about, there's painful moments in birth, and where did that come from, right? Interesting tribal explanations. This is what's going on. And notice this, and your husband will be your desire, and he will rule over you. So very, very simple point here. First off, this is not an invitation, right, for men to hoard power over women. This was a direct result of going the wrong direction, right? Not the direction we're moving toward, right? Wisdom, knowledge coming together. This is not wisdom speaking here. This is if you choose to go the wrong direction, then there will be people who hoard power over you. And this is where it makes sense. When you understand this, thinking about pregnancy, in your moments of greatest joy, you will experience your greatest pain. Think about childbearing in general, right? These kids are such beautiful gifts for the husband and the wife, right? Beautiful gifts. And yet, some of the most painful experiences come from raising children, don't they? Yeah, because at some points you're seeing mirror reflections of you, the mess that is you. Yeah, interesting. And again, the husband will hoard power over you. You will have a desire for your husband. Think about this one. How many times, and again, I would argue this is not just women, but men too. How many times in relationships, right, do we define ourselves? Do we find value in ourselves by the relationships we have? Yeah, there is a curse in that. Not that the divine sent this curse on you, but it is a very real temptation, right? When women get together, think about this at a party. When women get together, you don't hear them as often talking about what do you do, right? They'll pull out pictures of their kids. They'll get their iPhones out and start leafing through. And some men do this too, because I would argue it's universal. We oftentimes want to find value and identity in the relationships we have. But when we do this, it brings pain and brokenness, and it never satisfies. And if we go that direction, it brings brokenness over and over again. And so, because you chose to walk without wisdom with this new knowledge, you're going to have the very real temptation to find your identity in the relationships you have. Interesting, right? Notice this too. For the rabbi, for them, it was never a curse. The word, you wouldn't have seen curse there. These are observations. Yeah. So again, these observations, this is what will happen if you go this direction. Now, for the man, right? For the man, it goes like this. You again, you will be tempted, God says here, you will be tempted to do something different. In Genesis 11 or 17 here. He says, and to the man, because you listened to your wife, and you ate from the tree from which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it, Cursed be the ground for your sake. With toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. And it will cause thorns and thistles to grow for you, and you shall eat of the herbs of the field with the sweat of your face, and you shall eat bread until you return to the ground for which you were taken therefrom. For the dust you are, and from dust you will return. Let's go back to that metaphor. You're at a party many times. And again, it's universal. You'll find some women saying it, sometimes more than men. But it just depends. But oftentimes, right, we will fall into this place where we'll say, what do you do? Yeah, because many of us work, the things we do begin to define us. You're no longer a human being, you're a computer programmer. You're no longer a human being, you're a medical salesperson. You're not a human being, you're a teacher. Yeah, I am the thing I do. The problem with I am the thing I do is that what if you lose it? What if you lose the job? Does that mean your identity's gone? Are you really your job? Are you really your occupation? Because the Hebrews would argue, no. There is more to you than the stuff you do. And if you fall into that idea that you are the things you do, you fall into pain and brokenness. Nakedness, shame, and guilt always follow. And so you will be tempted to find your value in the things you do. But you don't have to, right? But that is, again, the observation. And so one more reminder, this comes from one of my favorite rabbis. He says, to the Jews, curses are not to be understood as punishments from Yahweh. They are observations. What will happen if one chooses knowledge and power without pairing it with wisdom? And so to all my friends listening, here's the beauty of this, right? These are not curses sent down from God because someone ate the wrong produce, right? That's crazy. It's just crazy. Here's the thing. When we choose not to walk with wisdom, when we choose to eat of the things that we think are going to satisfy and don't, there are certain things that oftentimes will happen, right? Certain things that will just happen. They're consequences. They're called consequences for a reason. And so you went down that road. You did the thing. And oftentimes we lose a sense of who we are. Yeah, and that's the real painful element of it. We lose a piece of who we are. And we begin identifying ourselves with what we do or who we know. And that is a huge trap. And it does not bring healing. It only brings more brokenness. And so for the Hebrews, what they are calling their nation to is that we are not defined by the work we do, right? You are not a slave. You are not a Babylonian because you are now in this nation. You are a child of the divine. You were made from the very things the stars are. You are a living, breathing miracle. You are a gift to the world. And that's how they began to understand who they are. And for you, I hope you can do the same, right? You are not the things you do. You are not the people you know. You are something so much better, so much bigger, so much more beautiful. And so what do we do with this, right? Because it's all very beautiful rhetoric, but what do we do with it? Well, I want to talk about identity. Here's some things we can do to remind ourselves of our identity. Who are we? I would say this, from the very get-go, ask yourself this question. What are my core values? Like, what are they? And some of you might say, I don't know. I don't have any core values. Think about the things that you value, the things that you find interesting in the world, that you're passionate about, right? Maybe it's injustice, whatever it is. What are the core values, your ethic, the things that make you make decisions, that cause you to get riled up? What are the core values? Write some of those down. And when you do, here's the beautiful part of this. When you know what your core values are, you can choose to do actions that follow those core values. And when you follow those core values, you will never find yourself out of alignment. Everything you do will be walking with wisdom. Yeah. Another thing to think about, you are a miraculous being, and I just said that, but remind yourself of that daily, right? Positive self-talk is actually a really good thing, especially if you've been beaten over the head by a religious system that pushes guilt and shame. And maybe you have, maybe you haven't. But I think reminding yourself, waking up in the morning and saying, it's a new day. It's a beautiful gift of life I have. And I am made of the stars, right? I'm made of the breath of God. And today I'm going to walk in that newness. I'm going to walk with that understanding. Good, right? Number 3, what makes you come alive? I think this is a really interesting one to think about. It even fits with like a mission statement. What are the things you're passionate about? Once you nail those down, you can do just about anything. And whatever you do, work doesn't define you anymore. It's the mission thing. It's your statement. For me, it took me a while to figure this out, but I realized for me, my mission statement is I create safe space where people can grow. Yeah. And so that mission statement, I can work as a teacher. I can work as a salesperson. I can work as a podcaster. I can do those things, but those things don't define me. Those aren't my mission. Once I understand my mission statement, the thing that drives me, the thing that causes me to feel alive, I can do whatever I want to do. Those things don't define me. Isn't that so good? Figure out your mission statement. There are a billion books out there that talk about mission statements. Choose one. Choose whatever one you want. Look at Amazon, see which one has the most stars. But take time to really recognize what your mission statement is, the things that cause you to come alive. And then lastly, who do you look up to? I think this one's really interesting. Who are the people that you respect most in this world, right? Oftentimes, when we see people we respect and love and admire, those are the characteristics we also know are in here somewhere. They just need to come out. So once we recognize those elements of another person, it's so easy to begin to understand they're here too. I want to leave you with this verse, 1 Peter 2:9. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of God who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Look, the Israelites, this is how they saw themselves, as a gift to the world, because they understood we have something really good here. And if we can give this to the world can be a better place. And so for you right now, you're not Jewish, right? Most of you are probably not Jewish. You didn't come from a direct descendant of Israel, and that's okay, right? But we can use this and apply it for today because you too have this chosen, beautiful purpose. There's only one of you, right? And so you can do something special here in this world too. It doesn't have to be something grand and affect global change, right? It could be as simple as creating some safe space for people around you. It could be as simple as helping someone down the street. Whatever the thing is that you have that special gift that nobody else has. No one has ever been you before in history. And that's a beautiful thing to consider. You have something that no one else can offer. And so offer it with love. Offer it with compassion. Allow wisdom and knowledge to guide that thing, that passion, that energy. And when you do, you help create beauty in the world. Everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. This is such a fun topic to consider. This book is filled with so much goodness. As always, please consider donating. ethos-church.org/donate. Support what we do here. Support this ministry. Tax-deductible donations. We want to continue doing this work. We think it is so good. We love reading these ancient texts. There's so much goodness there. Also, if you want to join us for live discussions where we basically look at different texts, we talk about it as groups. It's so fun. Twice a month, the 1st and the 3rd of every Saturday. Join us. Ask me if you want to be a part of it. Email me. I'll send you the Zoom link. And please subscribe. If you haven't yet, subscribe. Hit that bell button on YouTube. Everyone, we love you. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll see you next week as we continue in this book, Genesis. Bye, everyone.